Love believes all things and yet is never deceived. Life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. There are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true, the other is to refuse to believe what is true. Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. Don't forget to love yourself. Take a chance and you may lose. Take not a chance and you have lost already. It's better to get lost in the passion than to lose the passion. The most painful state of being is remembering the future, particularly the one you'll never have. The most common form of despair is not being who you are. Do it or don't do it, you will regret both. To dare is to lose one's footing momentarily. Not to dare is to lose oneself. The crucial thing is to find a truth which is truth for me, to find the idea for which I am willing to live and die. Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. Leap of faith, yes, but only after reflection. The highest and most beautiful things in life are not to be heard about, nor read about, nor seen but, if one will, are to be lived. Without risk, faith is an impossibility. Who am I? How did I come into the world? Why was I not consulted? A fire broke out backstage in a theater. The clown came out to warn the public. They thought it was a joke and applauded. He repeated it, the acclaim was even greater. I think that's just how the world will come to an end, to general applause from wits who believe it's a joke. I'm so misunderstood that people misunderstand me even when I tell them I'm misunderstood. For without risk there is no faith, and the greater the risk, the greater the faith. The function of prayer is not to influence God, but rather to change the nature of the one who prays. Confidence is the present tense of hope. People demand freedom of speech as a compensation for the freedom of thought which they seldom use. The greatest hazard of all, losing one's self, can occur very quietly in the world, as if it were nothing at all. No other loss can occur so quietly. Any other loss, an arm, a leg, $5, a wife, etc. is sure to be noticed. Face the facts of being what you are, for that is what changes what you are. Most people are subjective toward themselves and objective toward all others, frightfully objective sometimes, but the task is precisely to be objective toward oneself and subjective toward all others. The door to happiness opens outward. The more a person limits himself, the more resourceful he becomes. Worship isn't God's show. God is the audience. God's watching. The congregation, they are the actors in this drama. Worship is their show. And the minister is just reminding the people of their forgotten lines. I am so stupid that I cannot understand philosophy. The antithesis of this is that philosophy is so clever that it cannot comprehend my stupidity. These antitheses are mediated in a higher unity, in our common stupidity. Patience is necessary, and one cannot reap immediately where one has sown. The thing that cowardice fears most is decision. Wherever there is a crowd there is untruth. Purity of heart is to will one thing. To be a teacher in the right sense is to be a learner. I am not a teacher, only a fellow student. Whoever has learned to be anxious in the right way has learned the ultimate. Hope is passion for what is possible. Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. Love believes all things and yet is never deceived. It belongs to the imperfection of everything human that man can only attain his desire by passing through its opposite. Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. There are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true, the other is to refuse to believe what is true. This, then, is the ultimate paradox of thought, to want to discover something that thought itself cannot think. It is very dangerous to go into eternity with possibilities which one has oneself prevented from becoming realities. A possibility is a hint from God. One must follow it. People settle for a level of despair they can tolerate and call it happiness. I see it all perfectly. There are two possible situations. One can either do this or that. My honest opinion and my friendly advice is this: do it or do not do it, you will regret both. The tyrant dies and his rule is over, the martyr dies and his rule begins. If anyone on the verge of action should judge himself according to the outcome, he would never begin. What is a poet? An unhappy person who conceals profound anguish in his heart but whose lips are so formed that as sighs and cries pass over them they sound like beautiful music. What if everything in the world were a misunderstanding? What if laughter were really tears? Had I to carve an inscription on my tombstone, I would ask for none other than the individual. Love does not alter the beloved, it alters itself. In my great melancholy, I loved life, for I love my melancholy. It is not where we breathe, but where we love, that we live. On the secretly blushing cheek is reflected the glow of the heart. You train yourself in the art of being mysterious to everyone. My dear friend, what if there were no one who cared about guessing your riddle? What pleasure would you then take in it? Happiness is the greatest hiding place for despair. A human being is a spirit. But what is spirit? Spirit is the self. But what is self? The self is a relation that relates itself to itself, or is the relations relating itself to itself and the relation. To pace about, looking to obtain status, looking to attain importance. I can think of nothing more ridiculous. It is perfectly true, as philosophers say, that life must be understood backwards. But they forget the other proposition, that it must be lived forwards. I have only one friend, and that is Echo. Why is it my friend? Because I love my sorrow, and Echo does not take it away from me. I have only one confidant, and that is the silence of night. Why is it my confidant? Because it remains silent. What looks like politics, and imagines itself to be political, will one day unmask itself as a religious movement. I have, I believe, the courage to doubt everything. I have, I believe, the courage to fight against everything, but I do not have the courage to acknowledge anything, the courage to possess, to own anything.